and in no way was I running them through my male brain. As much as I can try to see the world as a woman, I never will be able to. And I know what I don't.
He further explains that even a single statement can qualify as defamatory if the person affected believes it has caused reputational damage. However, because the Macrons are public figures, they face a higher legal threshold. They must prove what is known as actual malice, a standard established in the US law that requires showing the statements were made either with knowledge that they were false or with reckless disregard for whether they were true or not. This is often one of the most challenging aspects of a defamation case, as it involves demonstrating not just what was said, but the intent and mindset behind it. The conversation also touches on a broader, increasingly relevant question. Is there a clear legal definition of a journalist today? Sean explains that there isn't a strict or universally applied definition, especially in an era where information is shared instantly across platforms and individuals on social media can reach audiences comparable to traditional media outlets. In the context of defamation law, what matters far more than the label of journalist is the behavior itself, specifically whether the person making the statements acted with actual malice. In other words, the legal focus is less on who you are and more on how responsibly you handle and present information. As the episode comes to a close, the hosts take a moment to thank listeners for their thoughtful and engaging questions, encouraging them to keep sending more for future discussions. The tone lightens once again as Sean jokingly reacts to being described as a certified fashion diva, tying back to the earlier conversation about courtroom style. With that mix of legal insight and humor, the show wraps up on an upbeat and approachable note, balancing serious analysis with moments of personality and charm. Hello and welcome back to Fame Under Fire from BBC Sounds with me, Anushka Matt. This week, we invited you to send in your questions on some of the most talked about legal and cultural stories right now, including the highly publicized Blake Lively-Justin Baldoni trial, ongoing discussions surrounding Candace Owens, and the lawsuit involving Emmanuel Macron that was filed in Delaware. The response was overwhelming in the best way possible, with so many of you submitting thoughtful, sharp, and genuinely insightful questions. We've carefully selected a number of them to explore in today's program, aiming to unpack both the legal complexities and the broader context behind these headline-making stories. Joining me for this discussion is our resident trial attorney, Sean Kent, who's with us from South Carolina. He appears today in what he humorously describes as a more toned-down, understated outfit, a simple gray suit that marks a shift from his usual more expressive style. The exchange kicks off with some lighthearted banter, as I point out the more subdued look, and Sean leans into the joke, describing himself as someone experimenting with understatedness and a lighter touch. Even the terminology of his outfit sparks a brief cultural moment, as we compare the American vest to the British waistcoat, with Sean playfully embracing the latter term. It's a small but charming reminder of the transatlantic nature of the show and its audience. From there, we move into the substance of today's discussion, beginning with questions centered on Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. As a quick recap for listeners, the two co-starred in the film It Ends With Us, a project that has since become overshadowed by a serious legal dispute. In December 2024, Lively filed a lawsuit accusing Baldoni of sexual harassment and alleging that he orchestrated a smear campaign against her, claims that have drawn significant public attention and debate. The lawsuit doesn't stop there. She has also named Jamie Heath and Wayfarer Studios, the production company involved in the film, expanding the scope of the case beyond just the two lead actors. Baldoni, for his part, has firmly denied all allegations and is actively contesting the claims in court, setting the stage for what could become a lengthy and closely watched legal battle. Much of the audience interest clearly lies in understanding the legal mechanics behind this case, what certain rulings mean, how lawsuits can evolve over time, and what possible outcomes might look like. One particularly interesting question comes from Lucy in Virginia, who asks about the implications of a previously dismissed lawsuit filed by Baldoni. Specifically, she wonders whether, if Baldoni were to win the civil case and a jury were to determine that Lively was not sexually harassed, he would then have the option to refile that earlier lawsuit. It's a nuanced question that gets to the heart of how dismissals, verdicts, and legal strategy intersect, and it's exactly the kind of issue we'll be breaking down in detail as we continue the discussion. Sean goes on to explain that Justin Baldoni would not be able to simply refile his lawsuit under the same legal theory if it has already been dismissed. The court's reasoning, he notes, is rooted in a broader legal principle. Statements made within the context of a lawsuit are generally protected, meaning they cannot form the basis of a defamation claim. This protection exists to ensure that people feel free to bring claims to court without fear of being sued for defamation over what they say in legal filings. However, Sean clarifies that this doesn't completely close the door for Baldoni. If he were to present an entirely different legal theory, separate from the one that was dismissed, he could potentially pursue a new claim. Even then, timing becomes critical, as the statute of limitations could pose a significant barrier. If too much time has passed since the alleged wrongdoing, he may lose the legal right to bring any case at all, regardless of its merits. The conversation then shifts to another audience question, this time from Lola in Canada, which brings Taylor Swift into the spotlight. The question centers on her credibility following the emergence of the so-called dragon texts. As discussed during the production of It Ends With Us, Blake Lively had reportedly rewritten a scene and later asked Taylor Swift to support and praise the revision to bold in private messages. Blake referred to both Taylor Swift and Ryan Reynolds as her dragons, a reference to the powerful creatures from Game of Thrones, seemingly implying that they were influential allies who could help reinforce her position. The situation gained further attention when headlines began suggesting tension between Blake and Taylor. Although, as the discussion makes clear, there is no confirmed evidence that Taylor Swift or anyone on her team leaked those messages. From a legal perspective, Sean explains that if Taylor Swift were ever called to testify as a witness, her credibility could become a key point of examination in court. Attorneys on the opposing side might use those messages to question her motives or to suggest that she was attempting to influence the situation behind the scenes. At the same time, her defense team could argue that these were simply informal, private exchanges between friends, taken out of context and blown out of proportion. In the end, it would fall to the jury to evaluate how much significance to assign to those texts, and whether they meaningfully impact her reliability as a witness. The discussion also touches on the strategic layers of trial preparation, noting that even seemingly minor cultural references can play a role in how a case unfolds. Sean points out that lawyers might consider selecting jurors who are familiar with Game of Thrones, ensuring they fully understand the dragon's metaphor and its implications. It's a reminder that in a courtroom setting, details that might appear trivial on the surface, like a pop culture reference in a private text, can take on unexpected importance and potentially influence how evidence is interpreted and, ultimately, how a case is decided. Lola also raises an interesting follow-up, asking how Taylor Swift might recover from a situation like this if the controversy continues to gain attention. The response suggests that, if her past behavior is any indication, she may choose to address it in a way that feels most natural to her through her music. Over the years, Swift has developed a reputation for channeling personal experiences, public scrutiny, and even criticism into her songwriting, often reshaping narratives on her own terms. Rather than engaging directly in public back and forth, she has historically leaned into creative expression as a way to respond, reframe, and, in many cases, come out even stronger in the public eye. Another listener brings up a more visual detail from the Blake Lively-Justin Baldoni trial, noting that Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni were seen wearing very similar olive green outfits during mediation. Sean explains that this is far from coincidental, emphasizing that wardrobe choices in legal settings are often highly strategic. Lawyers frequently guide clients on how to present themselves, down to the colors and styles they wear, because appearance can subtly influence how juries, judges, and even the public perceive them. Neutral tones like olive green, gray, or navy are commonly chosen because they project calmness, reliability, and relatability, qualities that can help humanize a client and create a more favorable impression in a high-stakes legal environment. The discussion then pivots to a separate but equally complex issue involving Candace Owens and the defamation case brought by Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte Macron. Owens has made a series of controversial claims about Brigitte Macron, all of which have been strongly denied by the A listener asks why these statements could rise to the level of defamation, prompting a deeper legal explanation. Sean clarifies that the issue isn't limited to a single claim or rumor. Rather, it's the broader pattern of allegations, including suggestions of deception, identity-related accusations, and conspiracy narratives that collectively contribute to potential reputational harm. In defamation law, it's not just about whether something is provocative or controversial, but whether false statements are presented in a way that damages someone's reputation.